Sitting Bull Sundance. As the weather got warmer, the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho and Arapaho others joined Sitting Bull as this camped by the Rosebud River and celebrated an annual Sundance. Sitting Bull danced for 3 days, slashing his arms with a knife and gazed at the sun until he fell into a trance. When he awoke, he told his men about a strange vision he'd had. He'd seen blue-coat soldiers falling like grasshoppers from the sky, their heads down and their hats falling off, dropping right in the Sioux camp. Battle of the Rosebud. When Cheyenne scouts spotted a common of bluecoats camped in the valley of Rosebud River, they knew that General Crook was coming for them. The native people had to strike Sitting Bull, so Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Two Moon led a war party of 1,000 Sioux and Cheyenne toward the soldiers' camp. Crazy Horse shone a battle. He had studied the way the Bluecoats fought and knew he could defeat them. When Crook ordered his men to charge, Crazy Horse used his knowledge to confuse and divide the Bluecoat ranks and eventually won the battle. The next morning, Cheyenne scouts confirmed that Crook's men had returned south. Sitting Bull's vision of the Bluecoats' defeat had turned out to be true.
Did Sitting Bull's warriors chase after the soldiers and kill them all? Asked Hannah. Oh, no, said Colonel Carbuncle. While the Bluecoats ran away, Chief Sitting Bull led all the Sioux to a new camp on the Little Bighorn River. Now there's a name to remember, Little Bullhorn. Anyway, he continued, Sitting Bull's people were joined there by more nations who moved off the reservations to follow him, 10,000 warriors in all. Of course, he didn't know the Lieutenant Colonels George A. Custer and his 7th Cavalry were heading his way. Long-haired Custer was about to make his last stand. George Armstrong Custer was a dashing army officer with flowing hair and drooping mustache. He had a name for himself during the Civil War and was known to be a hot-headed young officer. In November 1867, he led his troop of Bluecoats into Chief Kettle's peaceful camp on the Wichita River. The raid began at dawn and took the native people by surprise. Around 100 people were killed and 50 women and children captured. Custer ordered all 800 ponies to be slaughtered and the camp burned. It was a massacre as terrible as Sand Creek 4 years before.
Custer's last stand. Custer's success didn't continue. His famous attack was Sitting Bull's huge camp was his last. He ordered some of his men to cross the river and attack from the south, where Hunk Papa and Blackfoot Lodge stood. But when native sentries gave the alarm, Ogula and Miniconjo warriors leapt on their ponies and raced to help. As Custer's men began firing, bullets ripped through teepees. But then Cheyenne joined in, and soon the native warriors began to push the soldiers back in a cloud of dust, smoke, and confusion. Meanwhile, the rest of Custer's men approached from behind the hill. They didn't see the hundreds of warriors hiding in a ravine. When they got close enough, the warriors charged like bees out of a hive. The 7th Cavalry didn't stand a chance. All of them were killed, including Custer.
What happened to Sitting Bull? Asked Digby. Did he survive the battle? He did, said Mr. Rummage, but the government was furious. It thought the native people should be punished for killing Custer and his cavalry. But it was the Bluecoats who charged first, said Hannah. Mr. Rummage nodded. Even so, it wasn't long before troops were swarming over the area and pursuing the native nations. Sitting Bull and his Huckpapas fled over the Big Horn Mountain and across the border into Canada, where they thought they'd be safe. So he won the battle, but he lost his home, said Digby sadly. Yes, said Colonel Carbuncle. It was not really fair, but the government decided to offer him a pardon if he came back and lived peacefully on a reservation. He turned them down several times. I suppose he knew that they didn't keep their promise, said Hannah. That's right, and it was a very sad day. When he was finally forced to surrender, it was his son Curlfoot who handed over Sitting Bull's gun and tomahawk pipe, possibly the very one you're holding, young Digby. The great chief promised he'd teach the boy to be a friend to the Americans. He also wanted to be remembered as the last Sioux to surrender to the American government. And so he was added to the Colonel Gloomy. So he was.
On the run, with blue coats hot on his tail, Sitting Bull and his hunka-punkas sailed to the north. Meanwhile, the government took control of all reservations in Sioux territories and treated the people there as prisoners of war. The chiefs were forced to sign legal documents handing over the Black Hills and Powder River. Yet another treaty has been pushed aside. A new home. Sitting Bull refused to give in to the government, but this meant he had to find safety in nearby Canada. In May 1877, he and his battle-weary hunka-punkas crossed the Canadian border, determined to settle there. Sitting Bull was told he could stay as long as he and his people obeyed the law. Starvation. But the Canadian government didn't really want Sitting Bull in the country. They thought he'd make trouble sooner or later, so the hunka-punkas weren't given food or clothing, and when winter set in, they starved in the bitter cold. At one point, Sitting Bull heard that Father Hungenard of the Liebert Mission in the Quapaw Valley had ordered a shipment of flour. Sitting Bull was so desperate to trade with him that he offered Hungenard a beautiful Navajo blanket, saying, "How much will this buy?" But his efforts were in vain. There were hardly any buffalo left to hunt on the plains, and Sitting Bull had to save his people. Sitting Bull surrenders. In 1881, worn out by worry and hardship, Sitting Bull finally gave in and agreed to go in Fort Buford in Montana to surrender with a heavy heart, and gave up on his freedom and agreed to stay on a reservation.
The Buffalo Spirit. The Plains nations respected the earth and honored the buffalo. They believed that the buffalo, or Tatankia, was created by the Great Spirit and had the same right to the land as they did. They believed that the spirit of the buffalo helped them to have many children and healed the sick. Their most honored animal was the white buffalo, a rare albino they believed was a sacred leader of the herds. Buffalo ceremonies. The buffalo gave life to the Plains nations, and different groups performed ceremonies to call the herds. They used sacred buffalo skulls, buffalo-shaped stones, and even hairballs from buffaloes' stomachs to celebrate the rituals. The hunters always thanked the spirits for killing. Following the herd. For hundreds of years, the buffalo herds roamed the great grassy plains of Canada and the United States. They were once so numerous that they stretched as far as the eye could see. Native people called them Thunder of the Plains because their stampede across the plains sounded like a roll of distant thunder.
When Europeans came, Europeans changed the way native people hunted buffalo. Instead of hunting on foot, they rode on swift ponies and used deadly rifles to shoot the buffalo. For settlers, buffalo hunting meant the danger and adventure of the Wild West. The government actually encouraged the buffalo hunting as a way of keeping so-called hostile native people under control. They hired professional hunters to kill the animals. Soon there were hardly any buffalo left on the plains. Buffalo arts and crafts. Native people used every bit of buffalo. Nothing was wasted. They used the hides to make teepees, clothes, saddles, and shields. Meat was dried and eaten all year round, and fat was used for lambs. Buffalo hair was used to make rope. Blood was used to make war paint, and horns and bones were carved to make tools. Ribs made good sledge and snowshoes for the winter. The stomach was used to make cooking pots, and dug fueled the campfire.